Chapter 2 is titled The Stampede Trail. When we last left off in Chapter 1, it is basically the last time anybody has seen Chris McCandless at the end of his journey, basically. So heading into the Alaskan interior is his ultimate goal. That's like the end of his journey, basically. And then, of course, he dies in the Alaskan interior. So when Galleon drops him at the head of the Stampede Trail, it's basically the last anyone has heard from him. Chapter 2 picks up. Remember, the story is told a little out of order. Chapter 2 picks up the next time they basically find anybody would see McCandless, which is when they find his body on the Stampede Trail. So Chapter 1, last time anyone has seen him, Jim Galleon drops him off at the Stampede Trail. Chapter 2 is them finding his body on the Stampede Trail, and then the story starts to backtrack, getting into Chapter 3 with what happened to McCandless, what was his journey, all that jazz. Remember, every chapter starts with a map. In this case, they're showing you right here. Here's the Denali National Park. Here's the highway where that Galleon picked him up off of and then kind of drives him down that road to right around here. This is the Stampede Trail McCandless takes in to the Alaskan interior, and here is the bus he winds up on that you're going to read about, and that is pictured in a lot of the pictures when you see the title of the novel, Into the Wild. You see a picture of McCandless sitting in front of a bus. Well, this is it right here. So that's basically the Stampede Trail. And that's what this chapter is titled. So here we go. Remember, also at the start of each chapter, they give you a little blurb here. In this case, right here, Jack London is king. Alex Supertramp, May of '92. This is graffiti that they found carved in, that McCandless carved into a piece of wood that was around his campsite, around the bus area. And then they give you a little excerpt here from Jack London. Jack London, remember, wrote Call of the Wild and White Fang, both classic novels that turned into good movies as well. But this is a passage. This is the stuff McCandless was reading that was inspiring him. So this is a passage from White Fang that describes the Alaskan interior. And if you read a little bit, like right into here, it talks about the trees been stripped by a recent wind of their white covering of frost. They seemed to lead in towards each other, black and ominous. A vast silence reigned over the land. The land itself was desolation, lifeless, without movement, so lone and cold that the spirit of it was not even that of sadness. There was a hint in it of laughter, but of a laughter more terrible than any sadness, a laughter that was the mirthless as the smile of the Sphinx. Again, just trying to show you how vast, desolate, cold that Alaskan interior is. All right, here we go, guys. On the northern margin of the Alaska Range, just before the hulking ramparts of Mount McKinley and its satellites surrendered to the low Kantishna Plain, a series of lesser ridges, known as the Outer Range, sprawls across the flats like a rumpled blanket on an unmade bed. Between the flinty crests of the two outermost escarpments of the Outer Range runs an east-west trough, maybe 5 miles across, carpeted in a boggy amalgam of muskeg, elder thickets, and veins of scrawny spruce. Meandering through the tangled, rolling bottomland is the Stampede Trail, the route Chris McCandless followed into the wilderness. The trail was blazed in the 1930s by a legendary Alaska miner named Earl Pilgrim. It led to antimony claims he'd staked on Stampede Creek above the Clearwater Fork of the Toklat River. In 1961, a Fairbanks company, Utan Construction, won a contract from the new state of Alaska, statehood having been granted just 2 years earlier, to upgrade the trail, building it into a road on which the trucks could haul ore from the mine year-round. To house construction workers while the road was going in, Utan purchased 3 junked buses, outfitted each with bunks and a simple barrel stove, and skidded them into the wilderness behind a D9 Caterpillar. The project was halted in 1963. Some 50 miles of road were eventually built, but no bridges were ever erected over the many rivers it transected, and the route was shortly rendered impassable by thawing permafrost and seasonal floods. UTAN hauled 2 of the buses back to the highway. The third bus was left about halfway out the trail to serve as backcountry shelter for hunters and trappers. In the 3 decades since construction ended, much of the roadbed has been obliterated by washouts, brush, beaver ponds, but the bus is still there. This is the bus you see in the pictures that McCandless winds up in, and this is like the story of how it got out onto the Stampede Trail. A vintage International Harvester from the 1940s, the derelict vehicle is located 25 miles west of Healy as the Raven flies, rusting incongruously in the fireweed beside the Stampede Trail, just beyond the boundary of Denali National Park. The engine is gone. Several windows are cracked or missing altogether, and broken whiskey bottles litter the floor. The green and white paint is badly oxidized. Weathered lettering indicates that the old machine was once part of the Fairbanks City Transit System, Bus 142. These days, it isn't unusual for 6 or 7 months to pass without the bus seeing a human visitor, but in early September of 1992, 6 people in 3 separate parties happened to visit the remote vehicle on the same afternoon. In 1980, Denali National Park was expanded to include the Kitishna Hills and the northernmost cordillera of the Outer Range, but a parcel of low terrain within the new park acreage was omitted, a long arm of land known as the Wolf Townships, which encompasses the first half of the Stampede Trail. Because this 7 by 20 mile tract is surrounded on 3 sides by the protected acreage of the national park, it harbors more than its share of wolf, bear, caribou, moose, and other game, a local secret that's jealously guarded by those hunters and trappers who are aware of the anomaly. As soon as moose season opens in the fall, a handful of hunters typically pays a visit to the old bus, which sits beside the Shoshone River at the westernmost end of the non-park tract, within 2 miles of the park boundary. Ken Thompson, the owner of an Anchorage auto body shop, Gordon Sammel, his employee, and their friend, Ferdy Swanson, a construction worker, set out for the bus on September 6th of '92, stalking moose. It isn't an easy place to reach. About 10 miles past the end of the improved road, the Stampede Trail crosses the Tekanika River, a fast, icy stream whose waters are opaque with glacial till. The trail comes down to the riverbank just upstream from a narrow gorge, through which the Tekanika surges in a boil of white water. The prospect of fording this colored torrent discourages most people from traveling any farther. Thompson, Sammel, and Swanson, however, are contumacious Alaskans with a special fondness for driving motor vehicles where motor vehicles aren't really designed to be driven. Upon arriving at the Tekanika, they scouted the banks until they located a wide, braided section with relatively shallow channels, and then they steered headlong into the flood. I went first, Thompson says. The river was probably 75 feet across and real swift. My rig is a jacked-up 82 Dodge 4x4 with 38-inch rubber on it, and the water was right up to the hood. At one point, I didn't think I'd get across. Gordon has an 8,000-pound winch on the front of his rig. I had him follow right beside so he could pull me out if I went out of sight. Thompson made it to the far bank without incident, followed by Sammel and Swanson in their trucks. In the beds of two of the pickups were lightweight all-terrain vehicles, a 3-wheeler and a 4-wheeler. They parked the big rigs on the gravel bar, unloaded the ATVs, and continued toward the bus in the smaller, more maneuverable machines. A few hundred yards beyond the river, the trail disappeared into a series of chest-deep beaver ponds. Undeterred, the 3 Alaskans dynamited the offending stick dams and drained the ponds. Then they motored onward up a rocky creek bed through dense alder thickets. It was late afternoon by the time they finally arrived at the bus. When they got there, according to Thompson, they found a guy and a girl from Anchorage standing 50 feet away, looking kind of spooked. Neither of them had been in the bus, but they'd been close enough to notice a real bad smell from inside. A makeshift signal flag, a red knitted leg warmer of the sort worn by dancers, was knotted to the end of an alder branch by the vehicle's rear exit. The door was ajar, and taped to it was a disquieting note. Handwritten in near block letters on a page torn from a novel by Nikolai Gogol, it read, SOS, I need your help. I'm injured, near death, and too weak to hike out of here. I am all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I'm out collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you, Chris McCandless. August, because he's not sure of the date. The Anchorage couple had been too upset by the implication of the note and the overpowering odor of decay to examine the bus's interior, so Samuel steeled himself to take a look. A peek through a window revealed a Remington rifle, a plastic box of shells, 8 or 9 paperback books, some torn jeans, cooking utensils, and an expensive backpack. In the very rear of the vehicle, on a jerry-built bunk, was a blue sleeping bag that appeared to have something or someone inside it, although Samuel says it was hard to be absolutely sure. I stood on a stump, Samuel continues, reached through a back window and gave the bag a shake. There was definitely something in it, but whatever it was, didn't weigh much. It wasn't until I walked around to the other side and saw a head sticking out that I knew for certain what it was. Chris McCandless had been dead for 2.5 weeks. Samuel, a man of strong opinions, decided the body should be evacuated right away. There wasn't room on his or Thompson's small machine to haul the dead person out, however, nor was there space on the Anchorage couple's ATV. A short while later, a 6th person appeared on the scene, a hunter from Healy named Butch Killian. Because Killian was driving an Argo, a large amphibious 8-wheeled ATV, Samuel suggested that Killian evacuate the remains, but Killian declined, insisting it was a task more properly left to the Alaska State Troopers. Killian, a coal miner who moonlights as an emergency medical technician for the Healy Volunteer Fire Department, had a 2-way radio on the Argo. When he couldn't raise anybody from where he was, he started driving back toward the highway, 5 miles down the trail. Just before dark, he managed to make contact with the radio operator at the Healy power plant. Dispatch, he reported. This is Butch. You better call the troopers. There's a man back in the bus by the Shoshana. Looks like he's been dead for a while. At 8:30 the next morning, a police helicopter touched down noisily beside the bus in a blizzard of dust and swirling aspen leaves. The troopers made a cursory examination of the vehicle and its environs for signs of foul play and then departed. When they flew away, they took McCandless's remains, a camera with 5 rolls of exposed film, the SOS note, and a diary written across the last 2 pages of a field guide to edible plants that recorded the young man's final weeks in 113 terse, enigmatic entries. That, by the way, is how they know so much about him and his journey and what happened in Alaska and ultimately how he dies. It's the photo he documented through photos and through journals that he kept. The body was taken to Anchorage, where an autopsy was performed at the Scientific Crime Detection Laboratory. The remains were so badly decomposed that it was impossible to determine exactly when McCandless had died, but the coroner could find no sign of massive internal injuries or broken bones. Virtually no subcutaneous fat remained on the body, and the muscles had withered significantly in the days or weeks prior to death. At the time of the autopsy, McCandless's remained 67 pounds. Starvation was posited as the most probable cause of death. You guys, I want you to remember the last time you weighed 67 pounds. I mean, you're talking elementary school. This was a grown adult male. I want to say, what was his height, like 5'7", something like that? They tell you in here. But 67 pounds. McCandless's signature had been penned at the bottom of the SOS note, and the photos, when developed, included many self-portraits. But because he had been carrying no identification, the authorities didn't know who he was, where he was from, or why he was there. That poses kind of a problem for them. You've got to remember, guys, this is back in the 90s. They didn't have access to technology and search engines like we do right now. So this is going to start to pose a little bit of a problem. And it's kind of how the whole story gets rolling and how John Krakauer kind of got a hold of it, because they're putting out these messages, basically notifications, to see if anybody can identify who this person is.